Good afternoon. This is another episode of Tecman Talks Dynamics. Welcome to my colleague Liz Delaney, whom we're going to spend a little time this afternoon talking about the different clients for Dynamics Business Central and which one you should be using and why, and pros and cons of each one. So, Liz, I know you've got some strong views.
Yeah, it's probably just worth saying that this is obviously, if you're on BC 15 or beyond, then you might as well switch this off because you have no option but to use the web client. If you are on BC 14 or in the process of migrating to BC 14, which lots of our customers are at the moment, then they should definitely consider using the web client, if not for all their users, at least for some. Because it's inevitable. Everyone has got to get used to a new interface. So do it gradually, do it by team, choose people that can use the web client effectively and not be affected by some of the shortcomings that exist in the BC 14 version, which I was a bit of a latecomer to the web client, wasn't I, James? It took me a little bit of time to transition across, but it had to be done. It had to be done. And now when I go back to the full client, I find it quite difficult to use compared to the web client. And certainly if you've got new users, they will adapt, I think, to the web client much quicker than they would to the full client. So if you've got new users coming into the business and you're on BC 14 or above, or you're on BC 14, I would put them on the web client first. Would you, James?
Every time, I think that's the case. I mean, the web client became usable, I think, in BC 13. So, yes, it existed around, NAV 2018, etc., back through, but it was quite hard work, I think. But they did what Microsoft always do, which is progressively improve it, drive it forward. And I think once you've used the web client in BC 14, and as you said, don't get the choice above, but actually you'll come to quickly prefer it. It's faster. That's the overall thing. Navigating around the web client is definitely faster. Pages open quicker, data displays faster. Just the technology they tuned, and it really does work much better because your client machine is doing less. There's less data traveling between you and the back-end servers with the web client. It's really just the display. And that display doesn't take a lot of bandwidth because, as you know, Business Central is not the most kind of graphically intensive application out there. You can have a few pictures on the item card.
Are you saying it's not too pretty?
I'm saying it's
not a looker.
Yes, it's no, definitely. Well, we'll have a subjective discussion about what a looker actually consists of there, Liz.
That's not for this podcast, though.
Shall we? Are we talking functional here, or are we talking?
Yeah, it's functional. It's functional.
Yes. Rather than just being gratuitously kind of made up for the sake of it.
Yeah, just nice to look at.
Yes. So I think that's certainly the starting point. It works. Navigate around. I think the other thing that should drive, and even some of the people actually post 14 is look at some of the kind of the way role centers work and the way that some of the personalization works, and that is better in the web client and has got progressively better. So I'd call out one of the features I use all the time. Actually, post didn't exist in 14, but I think it came in about 16. Is the ability to bookmark. So if there's a particular page that I'm going back to all the time, and my control Q tell me I'm constantly searching, and I'm not a very good typist, so I don't type the name in very well and mistype it and all the rest of it. I 3 or 4 times of that, and I'm bookmarking the page, and it adds it to my role center, and then I'm just a click away. Other features of the web client I love, the multi-column search. God, when I go back to the Windows client and have to remember which column I want to actually set the search on and filter on, that's just a pain in the backside. Again, once you get post 14, this is really nuanced, and I'm probably confusing everybody now with what's in which version of which web client. But being able to save the different views with sorts, with filters defined there, save them. So you're only one click away, and then bookmark that particular saved filter, and it's on my web client. So I'm just going back to the pages that I like to use really, really quickly. I think is much better than anything that was in the Windows client.
And it's lower maintenance, isn't it? If a client update's needed, then you update the web client and it rolls out to everybody rather than having to upgrade clients on each individual machine.
Yeah, and that's there as well. Some of the things that we're starting to see, the way that you can build JavaScript. What's JavaScript? It's a language for kind of embedding what we call controls into that web client, so that we're not limited to just kind of text and the list views and so on. Now, we could do that in the Windows client, but because the Windows client was on every PC, you then had to make sure that JavaScript control was distributed to every PC. Now we can install a JavaScript control as part of an extension direct into the core service, and we know it's going to work on every client that's out there, whether that's a tablet device or whatever. So it just works. And probably the best example of that, if the one that I really like is the Netronic Gantt chart. That looks like it's part of the page, but you can manipulate, you can expand areas and scroll through it and all the rest of it. We're starting to see other JavaScript controls now, and some reporting with JavaScript. So certainly with my clever hat on across on the ISV side of the team, we're starting to kind of do warehouse layouts and kind of heap maps and things like that are really, really look good and make the data that you've got within Business Central really so much easier to kind of identify. If you think of a heat map of activity in a warehouse, you can say, right, this bin has been visited this number of times in the last 24 hours. And if you put that up as a list, people are looking, well, what's that bin code and where's that and so on. You put it up as a map of the warehouse and they go, oh, that corner is really busy, isn't it? Right, we need to redistribute stuff out. So, that's just an example of where, some of the stuff that we're doing now in the web client is just way ahead of what we could do back on the previous clients. I think this comes back to, making any future progression that you're planning on doing easy. And part of that is by getting used to what you can now rather than waiting, keeping everything for a big bang change on one particular day when you put that new system in.
Well, so that leads us on, I suppose, to why not move everybody over today. So if you're on BC 14 now, and you try to move every single user over in one go, you'd probably find, as the system admin person, you would get quite a few moans and groans. So it's probably only fair that we touch on some of the things in BC 14, which, to be fair, have been fixed in later versions and are much better in later versions, that would impact people if they moved all of their users over today. So it's going to be things like not being able to adjust column widths, which will drive existing users crazy. Not so much new users, but it will drive existing users crazy. And
it's different for every organisation. For instance, if you have your item numbers like over, I think it's about 12 characters, you can't see the whole of the item number in the number column on the sales order. And typically it's the last couple of digits that you really care about, because that's what makes a difference on that product. And not being able to say that just drives you nuts. So, that sounds bad, but if you have an 8-digit item number, you're home free, really easy, so it can come down to specific instances. I think the ones that I'm aware of, I think the financial controllers, the core finance team, things like account schedules. I mean, we could have a whole podcast on why people should use account schedules and don't. So if you, in some respects, you might get a benefit.
Let's note that one down, actually. That's a bit of a pet topic of mine. Let's do that one next.
But, so if you just cut and paste your entire chart of accounts into Excel and do all your management reporting in there, you've got no excuse to keep using the Windows client. You can go to the web client. But some of the areas on account schedules, some of the areas on analysis by dimension are tough. Matrix, some of the matrix forms are tough to use in the BC14 web client. As you say, they fixed them actually in the next version for that. Saving sets of filters you can't do in the BC14 web client. The ones that you save in the Windows client will show up in the web client, and you can use those, but you can't create new ones, which was a bit
and it's
crazy.
A bit annoying if you've done one that you need to have in the current month and you want to switch it. You have to go back into the web client, update it, and then it updates it.
Back into the Windows client. Sorry,
back into the Windows client, update it, and then back into the web client, which is a bit frustrating.
Yeah, so there are a few things, but I think anybody out on the road, any external people who are using it just for putting the odd sales order on or looking information up, I think navigation,
purchase orders, sales orders, anything like that.
Your management team who are drilling through information, I think the inquiry process, the navigation process around the system is easy. The
certainly function, searching for records, finding records, that's easier. So anybody that is a dipper in user, just bobs in occasionally, they'll find it easy to use, I'm sure.
Is there a role centre for dippers in? I think that there should be.
There should be.
Yes, so things like that. People who switch between role centres, that's much easier in the web client. The one thing that's not easier in the web client, I don't think, is switching between companies, because you haven't got the list of last companies that you were in.
No, I'm not even going to tell you how long it took me to find that option. It's embarrassing.
So you have to go in and then select the company. Although there is a good third-party solution to that now that gives that as a drop-down, a JavaScript drop-down on the top of the web client, so that you can actually switch company much quicker. So if you run lots of different companies and regularly have to change between them, having said that, the way I cope with that is I tend to have a shortcut that takes me into each company, and I tend to we're all used to having multiple tabs open in the web client, in your web browser. Well, actually, I tend to switch between tabs and have one kind of page, if you like, in my browser that's in each company, so I don't actually have to change.
So we'll get support to add a knowledge base article for that.
Yeah, I think there's different ways of coping with that, but as I say, you can build because you're using a web client. If you go company equals and the name of the company at the end of the URL that takes you into Business Central, it will log it into that company name. So setting them up as quick start shortcuts is easier than being in it and then trying to change from one company to another. So there's different techniques that we work to kind of almost navigate around some of the pain with the web client. And it's got some really nice features. You can set those shortcuts up. Actually, most of you will be aware that kind of different pages have a page ID, a number for that page. Again, if you go into what's called page inspection in the web client, which is a feature I really like, just allows you to see all of the fields that relate to a particular record, rather than just the ones that are on the screen. And that will also give you, for instance, the ID of the page you're on. And then on the end of the URL that you start Business Central with, you go page equals and the page ID number. When you log into Business Central, it will straight you straight to that page. So you can have, again, a shortcut in your browser that goes, takes me straight to our sales order list, or straight to an item list, or whichever page I really go to. So, again, those little things can kind of make a big difference and make it really easy to kind of speed up the process of getting where you need to go and using what you need to do.
And things like that in turn will then encourage the users to adopt the new interface much easier, and it won't be then such a big jump when you go beyond BC 14 onto the later versions.
I think getting used to it, getting used to anything, there is a pain in change, and we shouldn't underestimate that. Neither of us liked it when we first tried it, so we've been through that. We can empathise with that kind of point of view, but coming out the other side, honestly say now, I don't want to go back. I don't install the Windows client. I can't think of the last time I used it or install it. Even when I go to client sites, I'm like looking to see where it is in the web browser and constantly showing them in the browser.
Yeah, I agree. I had to force myself to adopt, and you do, and you get used to the new interface, and actually you start to think when you go back to the old one, gosh,
mentioning the dreaded, coming on to the pandemic we're in at the moment and the work from home, and where people, here in the UK, we're having a lot of people who are having to self-isolate suddenly because they're told they've been in contact with somebody. And so they have to, literally drop what they're doing and drive home and stay there for 10 days. And if you're in a web browser, you can go and use any PC or any device. I'll pull it up on the web browser on my tablet rather than necessarily install the app on my tablet. I could do that, but it's quicker just to use it in a web browser. And it doesn't, as long as I've got my credentials and my URL to get into it, that's very quick and easy. And if you're on the SaaS version, well, businesscentral.dynamics.com. It's not a hard URL to remember, is it, really? So much easier, which means I can do whatever I want on whatever device I happen to be using from anywhere, which I don't have to think about installing anything or connections or whatever. It's great. So one of our colleagues is working for a Microsoft house, has stopped using a PC and is now how long's Matt been using a Mac for? 4 months, 5 months now?
Yeah.
Which tells you kind of all of the software. Business Central, we used to groan when customers said, can you use it on a Mac? Now one of us is doing it on a minute by minute daily basis and with no impact. So really gives you the choice of what you want to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think the message here is get it up and running and move across the users that can move across without being negatively impacted. And if you're on BC 14, that's definitely what you should do.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, if you're not on 14, if you're beyond 14, keep pushing the boundaries of don't assume that you know it all. The web client has got lots of features that are really quite cool. And yes, we should push out more and more education, knowledge-based articles, etc. about starting pages up, like I've already described. You can do that with a preset filter as well. So you can almost make those filters dynamic to go in and, one click away from here's a list of our overdue debtors or items which need a reorder past their reorder point and things like that. So some really cool ways of kind of speeding up what you do. And haven't met many clients yet who don't want to speed up what they do. Never get enough efficiency.
Definitely.
Okay, so I think that's about it for this episode. A shorter one, perhaps, but don't just because it's been slightly shorter doesn't mean it's any less important. And I think great advice to say, go look at the web client, go try and adopt it, get used to it, use it. Put it in your shortcuts. Use it when you quickly need to pop into Business Central, quickly do this, that, and the other. Any new starts, put them on the web client from day one. Don't teach them old bad habits, and get them used to it from the get-go.
100%.
Lovely. Okay. Well, thanks for your time, Liz. Always good to talk to you, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.